I'm Arvind Swaminathan. I'm a partner at Orrick Harrington Sutcliffe in our Seattle office, and I'm part of our cyber privacy data innovation practice group.
I'm David Dunn. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Kroll, and I've been there for about 8 years. Prior to Kroll, I was the Director of Incident Response for FIS Global, and I had about a 2-decade career in law enforcement before that.
One of the things that's been happening a lot is focus on individuals' liability in the CISO community, right? And so just yesterday, Merrick Garland made a speech where he said the best way to get companies to change is to hold executives liable. It's fundamentally what he said, right? And that's really goes back to what Sally Yates said back in the Department of Justice, years ago during the Obama administration, right? Executive accountability will get companies to change. So we've seen increased focus on executives, whether it's a CISO or a CEO or a CFO, when it comes to cybersecurity. So as a CISO, I'm really interested in sort of just like, what do you think about what keeps you up at night in that context?
So I had a boss once who said, bad news is not like fine wine. It does not get better with age. And I take that to heart. And it's for me, it's about disclosure. If something's coming down that I'm concerned about that needs to be disclosed, I need to make sure that I understand what the issue is, and then I am letting the folks who need to know, whether that's legal risk, other folks on the C-suite, what that issue is. Most problems can be solved if you address them, but I think where my concerns are is knowing something and not saying something. That's, I think, where I see the risk for me personally.
Okay. How much foundational work do you have to do to make that happen, right, before you need to do it, right? So like when you think about how you have to level set with your leadership, that's my job, that's what I'm going to do, here's how we're going to do this together. How much foundational work goes into preparing them to have that conversation for you to make that information available to them so they can act on it?
A lot. So, from a Kroll perspective, we do a lot of work with our executives so that they understand what a security incident is, what a security event is, and what risk and what the potential risk is surrounding those. So, for example, you came out to Kroll last year and we did a tabletop exercise, right? So we had our C-suite and our business unit leaders in a room and we walked through a security event with them. These are the things that we need to think about. This is how a situation like this would play out so that when something bad happens, it's not a crisis moment. Everybody knows what their role is and is able to function and get to getting the work done.
How much of that is culture, right? And what is your role? What do you see your role or your responsibility, or what responsibility should CISOs have in trying to set that culture?
You have to have a strong relationship with your legal and risk departments and your CEO. They have to trust that when you say something, it's true. You can't pull the fire alarm for everything, right? Like that's one thing. If you complain about every single thing, then they're not going to listen to you. You need to bring the big bucket items to their attention and say, hey, these are the things that I'm worried about. But the other part of it is you have to be smart enough to sort of preload those things, right? So, hey, we're rolling out this product. Here's some potential things that we need to be thinking about. I'm not saying it's a problem today, but these are potential issues. So it's starting, it's baby steps. You can't hold everything back, but it's really educating them on what the potential risks are ahead of time and just having an honest, open relationship.
It sounds like one of the things you need to do is have like a common vocabulary, a common framework for saying, look, these are the risks that we care about, right? And these are the risks that I'm going to bring to you immediately. These are the ones that we're going to work on resolving until they become something different,
sure,
right? So how do you build that framework, right? What goes into determining what gets escalated and what doesn't get escalated?
So in the sort of our long-term risk program, so we have a risk management program, and that is where we bubble up all those risks, whether it's compliance, information security and IT, transactional risk, legal risk. So that's where we collect all of those sort of big bucket items that need to be on the radar of our C-suite, right? So that's where these are the dozen things, and not more, these are the dozen things that should be on your radar that we may come to you and say, hey, something went wrong, we need investment, you need to be aware of it, and that's how we deal with it at Kroll. There may be 10 or 15 items that contribute to that one risk, but I want them to be aware of what that big picture item is.
Okay. And when you think about, so when you don't have that culture, what do you do in that situation, right? When you have, even if you've tried to do the groundwork and you tried to level set, but you don't still have that culture, what should you as a CISO be doing, or what do you think about doing when you have one of those situations that does need to get escalated?
I think one of the areas where you can really benefit is bringing in another voice, somebody from outside that your C-suite, that your legal and risk team will trust and will listen to, and that you've sort of agreed ahead of time. This is the message that I'm trying to get across to them. Can you give it to them in your words, right? So a lot of times hearing something from somebody outside the organization that's parroting what you're saying inside can help tremendously, whether that's through a tabletop exercise, whether that's through a security briefing. You know, we've engaged with law enforcement in the past and we have relationships with them, but bringing in somebody from the outside to sort of validate what you're talking about.
And help magnify the message that you're trying to send,
Absolutely.
right? So that requires you to lay groundwork with them as well ahead of time,
Yes.
right? And have that option available to you.
CISO is all about relationships, right? Like the technical CISO anymore, especially for a mid or large size organization, really, I don't see that it exists anymore, right? That person is now your security architect. He's your, director of security operations. The CISO is that bridge builder, the person that is sort of orchestrating all of that things. Yeah, you have to have technical knowledge, but you have to have trusted people that are executing the figures and the hands on the keyboard.
Great. So let's flip this around for a second. You're a CISO, you're an individual at a company. If you run into the situation, let's talk about what you worry about and ask me questions where there are things that are on your mind, and how do you solve some of those problems as an individual?
I think some of the biggest issues that we are concerned about from the CISO space is just the changing regulatory landscape, right? So when we look at a lot of the cyber issues that are going on, it's difficult for CISOs to keep up, right? Whether it's I think next week we're going to see the EU AI laws coming out, right? I guarantee you that, I'm sure California, Massachusetts, New York will come out with AI laws, and it's trying to keep on top and abreast of what those laws and regulations are, because they will directly impact security, product security, privacy, and a lot of those things. So that's an area where, I'm curious on your thoughts there.
Yeah, so I think the key in that situation is really what you've already said, which is like you've got to build that relationship with legal so that you understand and have access to that changing dynamic, right? How are you keeping abreast of those laws should be coming from the legal organization, so you're partnering and look for the issues before they happen, right? And so a lot of folks will have a regular meeting where like, okay, here's what's changing in the landscape, because what you hear and what your general counsel hears sometimes are very different, right? The general counsel in an organization may not be focused on what the new cyber regulations are, but you are. The most important thing, though, is to have a conversation about that together. And you just said it's all about building relationships. And you need to build a relationship on the fact that they don't always have their eye on that particular ball, and you don't always have your eye on that particular ball. But if you sit down together and work through that, you can be abreast and stay ahead of it. The last thing you want to be doing, like you just said, is like finding out that it's an issue only because it happened now, right? And not being ahead of the game. And so that proactive engagement is, I think, the most powerful things that individuals can do to make sure they know what the landscape is.
I think the other part of it is just CISO liability. I'm curious to your thoughts on that, right? When I make a decision, when I talk to legal, risk, whatever, or when I talk to our board or CISO, I do it from a position of, honesty and ethics, right? I try my very hardest to present them with the best information that I can, but we're also in an area now where we've seen CISOs convicted in criminal court, criminal federal court. So what are your thoughts, recommendations for the CISO?
So I think you started this, which is like my job is about making sure there's disclosure. I'm escalating issues and I'm getting them out there. So I think that's the first foundation that you have to have, and you have to have that common understanding that that's what you're actually going to do. In terms of thinking about you as an individual, right, it's having process built behind that and having like a common understanding. So we talked about that framework. Like, when am I going to escalate issues and raise them to you? Like, let's have a common understanding of what that is. The most important thing is that in the early days of an incident, what's in your best interest and what's in the company's best interest, they're the same thing, right? And you've got to remember that. It's not you against the company. It's not you ratting on the company or anything like that. It's exactly the opposite. If you have an established process as an organization for here's what we're going to do, here are the incidents that matter, here's how we're going to escalate it, here's what we're going to escalate, here's when, and here's how we're going to deal with it, and you're following that process, that's good for you and your organization. And I think that's the key to understand, is that if you are unified in that approach and you understand that like what's good for me is good for the company, you're really going to have an easy time of navigating these pitfalls. And so even notwithstanding, we still see individuals held accountable for it. But when you're in line and following that process, that's really your first line of defense.
Sure. Makes sense.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.